Well, welcome. Today we've got Elliot Long. He's the Managing Partner at Pacific Talent Partners, which is an executive talent search organization. Elliot, this is lovely to have you here, our first sort of podcast. So welcome, and tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. So I'm the Managing Partner, as you say, of Pacific Talent Partners. So what we do effectively is we support an industry agnostic group of clients, whether they be listed or private businesses, with both the build of their boards primarily, which is the focus of today's conversation, but also their executive teams. And so we have a good lens on, the clients that I support do look to shift the impact that boards have on their organisations depending on the economic needs and the sort of phases in the cycle. And I think there's been some really interesting trends recently where those priorities have shifted.
And what are the boards telling you, on those priorities? What are the boards telling you that they're looking for in a candidate?
Yeah, well, I think the main thing is there has been a shift from, if we rewind 3 years ago, or maybe even 4 years ago, the sort of back end of the pandemic, demand was running in the door for all businesses. And so products were effectively selling themselves, services were selling themselves, and it was all about how to remain governance focused and operationally focused and kind of keep the business on the journey as growth happens.
Yeah.
Now we're in a very different phase, and so demand isn't running in the door for everything. And so I think the shift that's happened has been towards boards being mentors of strategy for executive leadership teams. So far more hands-on around, well, I've seen a GFC before, I know how to architect a business to grow again. We need to divert some capital to, sales and business development talent. We need a new CEO that can understand how to push the top line and profitability. And so I think that's the really interesting trend that we've seen, which is basically from governance and risk, which is still important, to the main influence being, how are we going to grow the organisation, and the experienced board members adding value on that front mostly.
Okay, so that real commercial aspect is very important. How have you seen lawyers in particular? Because I suppose not all lawyers have huge amount of commercial experience, at least in terms of, say, bringing products to market or managing a business. How have you seen them kind of dealing with that priority?
So true. Yeah, I think the reality is, I do support often general counsels from client-side businesses stepping onto boards, and I do support partners of law firms stepping onto boards as well. And I think the truth is that no matter what service line and what specialism you have as a partner, there is some value you can bring to strategy. Ultimately, your day job as an executive is to provide advice to organisations as they navigate difficult things. So that might be IP partners that understand how to protect intellectual property, or it might be commercial disputes partners that understand when a business is growing, these are the traps that you typically fall into, or a construction and building partner that might understand how a big listed construction organisation might, you've seen the pitfalls and the challenges and things that can get businesses unstuck and distract them from growth. And so I think it's less about not being as commercially focused. It's shifting the mindset of not being as commercially focused. Actually, yes, I do know the key areas to avoid when you're trying to grow. And so I think there's always value that can be added, but just changing the narrative around how a partner pitches themselves and the value that they bring on the commercial front.
And is there things there that you see boards, sort of the turn-offs then, like that boards are telling you, or you're seeing when people are applying for these sorts of positions, that really turn boards off and go, no, we don't want to touch that candidate?
Yeah, it's funny because I think that's shifted recently as well. Again, if you rewind maybe 4 or 5 years, 10 years, it was very attractive to have a non-executive that is no longer an executive and has a full suite of board seats and has been a board member only for 15 years and is fully focused around being a board member. That was the most attractive type of profile. I think that's changed because of 2 key reasons, namely the way that technology influences business growth at the moment. So, someone's been out of the executive seat for 15 years will have no idea what the impacts of AI are going to be and how actually organizations are using things like AI in today's business rhythms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, workforce makeup has changed significantly. So you've got different generations in businesses that have different priorities and different drivers. There are some generations and personalities and people in organizations now that aren't necessarily, their top priority isn't progression and how much money you get paid. And so then how do you inspire and grow those people to deliver great results? And so I think what puts people off is a lack of recency of knowledge. And it doesn't mean you have to be an executive at the moment. It just means that you have to have done some significant work on how unique and different the business environment is at the moment. And so I think that's probably the one thing that we've seen change most of recent.
Nice, keeping that currency with what's happening. I suppose everything's moving a lot faster now. So
yeah, and also if you only, if you're very narrowly focused as a partner or a general counsel around, I only know my organization and I only know my industry, boards tend to be a little bit more industry agnostic. And so if you're not open to interacting and networking with other sectors, you're less attractive because you just don't have a breadth of knowledge and or network and or experience to bring to the table.
And then I guess to sort of end on like high level, what are 3 things that really matter? If I was going out, someone's going out to apply for a board position, what are like 3 things that really matter to them that you should be focusing your attention on?
Yeah, good. Well, on the spot answers. One is actually opening the door in the first place. So we know that most board opportunities end up coming through network, even more so than search firms like ours. And so I think the mistake that people make is when they're in their executive role prior to stepping onto board seats, they don't engage with people. They don't network for the purposes of opening those doors. And so I think number one, doesn't matter how attractive you make yourself, if you're not in front of people who are decision makers on who gets non-executive seats, then you're not even in the conversation. So I think number one, that's probably the top priority. Number two, you've got to pitch yourself well. I think that a lot of board members don't do the necessary due diligence to work out what the board matrix of an organization looks like and where the gaps are. So we often coach our non-executives around, have a think about the organization that you're meeting. Do they have a lawyer already? Okay, well then I've got to pitch myself in a different way. Do they have an audit and risk chair? Do they have X, Y, Z? And once you've identified the gaps, you can really lean into and pitch yourself well around how you can solve those challenges. And then I think the third piece that's really critical is actually working out what sectors and businesses you're passionate about. Board roles are generally, there are phases where they're very intense. There are phases where you don't get paid a lot for them. And so I think the biggest problem that we see is people assume that they're an end of career right off into the sunset ticket, and they're not actually that willing to be as strategically involved as they need to be. When a CEO resigns, when there's a takeover bid, when there's a refinancing that has to happen, you really have to drop everything and step into a business for weeks on end, almost in an executive capacity, to mentor the ELT. And so I think being prepared to be passionate about the organization you sit on the board of will help you manage your expectations around exactly what you've got to contribute.
Yeah, excellent. That makes a lot of sense. It's really good. Thank you. Well, Elliot, thank you for your time today. Much appreciated. We'll see you on the 25th at our next HUBL event.
It's been a pleasure and very much looking forward to it. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you. Cheers.